In the Italian Alps, where snow covers the peaks with a mantle of eternal silence, and the pure mountain air invites the soul to a profound peace, there exists a place where time walks at a different rhythm. In the small and welcoming city of Schio, protected by the sturdy stone walls of an ancient convent, there lived a woman whose story defies the very logic of the world. Her skin carried the marks of a life of trials, brilliant as ebony, contrasting with the pristine white of the snow that fell in the European winter. On her body, she bore a map of scars, physical marks of a life that knew pain in its most intense form. Yet on her face, there was a smile that possessed the luminosity of the midday sun. She was affectionately known as Madre Moretta. Those who observed her in old age, opening the convent gate with infinite sweetness, or embroidering sacred vestments in the quietude of the sacristy, could hardly imagine the odyssey that soul had traveled. That nun, with calm steps and serene gaze, had crossed scorching deserts, survived tempests of human cruelty, and navigated uncertain oceans to find there, finally, her safe harbor. This is the narrative of how a girl who had her own name stolen by fear became one of the freest and most radiant souls the Church has ever known. Welcome to the sacred story of the life of Saint Josephine Bakhita. Before we enter into the secrets of this extraordinary life, I extend an invitation to you. This channel exists to be your daily refuge, a space carefully prepared to welcome your weariness and transform it into serenity. If this mission brings you well-being, support our work by subscribing and leaving your like. It is a silent, simple gesture that allows us to continue weaving these stories. Now grant yourself a true pause. The urgencies of the day have already passed. The world out there will continue its course while you rest. Settle comfortably wherever you are. Feel the support that sustains your body. Breathe deeply, filling your lungs with fresh air. And as you release the air, visualize that you are also releasing the weight of worries, the tension in your shoulders, the noise in your mind. Let calmness envelop you, heavy and warm, like a wool blanket in winter. We will travel together, guided by the hand of Saint Bakhita, departing from the vibrant heat of Africa toward the sacred coolness of Italy. To understand the light that Bakhita radiated, we must first feel the red earth of her origin. Our journey begins far away in the vast and hot lands of Darfur in Sudan around the year 1869. The early childhood of the one who would become a saint resembled a golden dream. She belonged to the Daju tribe, living in a loving and prosperous family in total harmony with the cycles of African nature. Imagine vast fields where the horizon seems infinite. She remembered running freely through those lands, playing with her siblings under the shade of the great baobabs, and feeling deeply loved and protected. "I grew up bathed in affection," she would recall later. It was a simple life, governed by the rising and setting of the sun, full of laughter and belonging. However, the innocence of that time suffered a terrible rupture. Still very small, around 7, while walking through the fields with a friend, wandering slightly from the safety of home, destiny changed its course. 2 strangers emerged from the vegetation. They were slave traders. In an instant of confusion, threat, and absolute terror, she was separated from everything she knew. The shock to that infant heart was devastating. The trauma was so deep that the girl's mind, in a desperate defense mechanism, blocked her memories of identity. When later they asked her who she was, the girl tried to find her name, but encountered only emptiness and silence. Fear had taken her identity. Before that child mute with terror, her captors baptized her with cruel irony. They called her Bakhita, which means the fortunate one. At that moment, it seemed like mockery. The future, however, would reveal that that name held a hidden prophecy. She would, in fact, be fortunate in finding the greatest of all treasures. What followed were 12 long years of a painful way. Bakhita was forced to walk hundreds of kilometers. Imagine the sensation of scorching desert sand beneath bare and fragile feet. The relentless sun punished the skin during the day, and the cutting cold of the desert froze the bones during the night. She was taken to the great slave markets. There, the girl without a name and without a family passed from hand to hand, being sold and bought 5 times. She knew the absolute loneliness of being surrounded by strangers without hearing a single word in her mother tongue, treated like merchandise, a piece without will and without soul. There were moments when existence weighed upon her with unbearable harshness. When she served a Turkish general, Bakhita lived Calvary in her own flesh. In a cruel cultural ritual of that region, she was subjected to forced tattooing to mark her owner's possession. The scene demands our compassion. They drew on her body, on her chest, on her abdomen, and on her right arm complex geometric patterns. With a razor, they made 114 cuts in her skin. And to ensure that the scars would remain raised and visible, they rubbed salt into the open wounds. Bakhita remained for days lying on her mat, motionless, burning with fever, enduring a pain that goes beyond description. As we recall this fact, our focus falls upon the mysterious force that kept her alive. How did that fragile flower not wither before such aggression? What sustained the breath of life in her chest? In her memoirs, dictated decades later, she revealed the secret of that resistance. In those nights of agony and loneliness, when everything seemed lost, she looked toward the immense African sky. She contemplated the silvery moon, majestic in the darkness, and the brilliant stars that covered the firmament. And in the innocence of her natural soul, she wondered, who is the owner of these beautiful things? Who lights the lights of the sky? I would very much like to meet him. Without knowing theology, without knowing sacred books, Bakhita was already dialoguing with God through the beauty of creation, and he, the owner of beautiful things, was guarding her. He preserved the flame of that life because he had a plan of love that she could not yet comprehend. Bakhita's horizon began to brighten in 1883. In the capital of Sudan, Khartoum, she was acquired by the Italian consul Callisto Legnani. The change was noticeable. For the first time in more than a decade, the voice that addressed her carried tones of civility and respect. In the consul's residence, the whip disappeared, giving way to an atmosphere of calm and order. The constant fear that kept her muscles always tense began to relax, allowing the birth of a timid trust. When the political situation in Sudan worsened and the consul needed to return to Italy, Bakhita felt an urgent call within her. She knew that that man represented her only security. With courage born of necessity, she pleaded to leave with him. And so the girl from the desert knew the sea. The crossing of the Red Sea and then the Mediterranean was an overwhelming sensory experience. The swaying of the ship, the smell of salt and brine, the blue immensity that stretched as far as the eye could see. She was leaving behind the land of her suffering and sailing toward the unknown. Upon disembarking in Italy, everything was new. The cold climate required heavy clothing and layers of wool. The architecture, the food, the sounds of church bells marking the hours, everything composed a new world. She was welcomed by the Michieli family, friends of the council, and became the nanny of little Mimina. In the gardens of a villa near Venice, caring for that child and playing among the flowers, Bakhita's natural sweetness began to flow again. But the true turning point, the moment that would divide her life into before and after, happened in the sacred silence of a convent. When the Michieli family needed to travel on business, they entrusted Bakhita and little Mimina to the care of the Canossian sisters in Venice. It was there, in the dim light of the chapel, where the air smelled of ancient incense and beeswax, that Bakhita had her revelation. Her eyes rested upon a large wooden cross hanging on the wall. On it, the figure of a man nailed with an expression of pain and surrender. Bakhita, who had never heard of the gospel, asked one of the sisters, "Who is this man?" "He is Jesus Christ, the Son of God," the nun explained patiently. "He suffered all of this out of love, to save us." Bakhita was paralyzed. She approached the crucifix. Her eyes traveled over the wounds of Jesus. She saw the nails. She saw the crown of thorns. And then she looked at the marks on her own body. She touched the scars on her arm. A mystical understanding flooded her soul like a strong light. That God was not a distant and untouchable master. He knew pain. He knew what it was to be wounded, scourged, humiliated, and imprisoned. He understood the language of scars. But there was a fundamental difference that touched Bakhita's heart. She suffered because evil men forced her to. He, being God, chose to suffer because he loved. Bakhita felt an immediate and profound connection. Her suffering found rest in his suffering. In contemplating the crucified one, she saw supreme love. "The Paron loves me," she thought, using the dialectal word for master or lord. "He truly knows me." That certainty of divine love planted in her an indestructible strength. When Mrs. Michieli returned to fetch her daughter and Bakhita with the intention of taking them back to Africa or to another city, the unthinkable happened. The woman who had always obeyed, who had been trained to be invisible and submissive, rose up. With a firm voice, serene but charged with steel determination, Bakhita looked into her mistress's eyes and declared, "No, I will not go. I am staying here. I belong to the Paron." There was tension. There was pressure. The case was taken to the authorities. It was then that the Patriarch of Venice and Italian justice intervened with the liberating truth. In Italian soil, slavery did not exist. The law was clear. Bakhita was, and had always been since she set foot in Italy, a free woman. She could choose, and she chose God. On January 9, 1890, dressed in white, she knelt at the baptismal font. The sacred water flowed over her forehead, symbolically washing away all the past of pain. There, she received a new name, a new identity, Josephine Margaret Fortunata. Josephine, to grow in faith; Margaret, the precious pearl of God; Fortunata, the translation of her name Bakhita, confirming that her fortune was divine. Witnesses said that upon receiving the sacraments, her eyes shone with such intensity that they seemed to reflect the light of heaven itself. The flower of the desert had finally taken root in her eternal garden. Bakhita's life in the convent of Schio, where she lived for more than 50 years, was a masterpiece of simplicity. There were no great theological preachings or missionary journeys. There was instead the sanctification of the small, the invisible, the everyday. Upon wearing the religious habit of the Canossian sisters, she transformed each repetitive gesture into a liturgy of love. For years, her sanctuary was the convent kitchen. Imagine the environment: the welcoming warmth of the great wood-burning stove, the rustic smell of flour being kneaded, the aroma of fresh bread baking in the early morning hours. Bakhita's hands, large and strong, which once carried heavy chains, now handled food with tenderness and vigor. She peeled vegetables, washed heavy iron pots, and prepared meals for the community. The kitchen atmosphere was permeated with her prayerful presence. When someone asked her how she managed to work so much while maintaining that constant smile, she would respond in her Venetian dialect, "I do everything for the Paron." Each washed dish was a prayer. Each swept floor was an act of gratitude. Later, she took on the care of the sacristy and the linen room. The sensory atmosphere changed. Now the air smelled of pure beeswax, dried lavender used in the drawers, and the residual incense from masses. Bakhita's touch learned reverence for sacred fabrics. She spent hours starching the white linen corporals, caring for velvet vestments, polishing golden chalices. In the silence of the sewing room, one could hear only the rhythmic sound of the needle piercing the fabric and the almost imperceptible whisper of her lips praying the rosary. She conversed with the Virgin Mary with the intimacy of a daughter. But it was as the doorkeeper that the city of Schio came to know the depth of her soul. Upon assuming the porter's lodge, Bakhita became the welcoming face of the convent. The sound of the bell was for her the voice of God calling. She would arise promptly, adjust her habit, and open the heavy wooden door. Children from the neighboring school would stop just to see her and touch her hands. Tired workers, distressed mothers, the poor asking for alms, all were received with the same regal respect. Her hoarse voice, with the endearing accent of one who learned the language by listening to the people, dispensed blessings and words of encouragement. She would pass her hand over the children's heads and say, "Be good." For Bakhita, the porter's lodge was the frontier where God's love touched human need. The world outside those walls, however, plunged into chaos. World War II broke out, and northern Italy became the stage for conflicts and bombings. Air raid sirens became the frightening soundtrack of nights in Schio. The sound of explosions made the convent windows vibrate, and fear attempted to settle in hearts. In the midst of that terror, Bakhita remained as a tower of peace. While many ran desperately to underground shelters, she walked calmly, refusing to give fear the last word. People sought her for security, and she would say with unshakable certainty, "Do not be afraid. The Paron will not allow anything to happen to this house. We are under the Mother's mantle." Her faith was so palpable that it functioned as a shield, and in fact, history records that although the city suffered severe damage, the orphanage and convent where Bakhita prayed remained untouched, protected by that invisible dome of prayer. The years passed, and the body that had endured the desert and hard work began to ask for rest. A severe form of arthritis combined with respiratory problems confined Bakhita to a wheelchair, but illness could not extinguish the smile. She spent her days on the terrace contemplating the Alpine mountains, tirelessly fingering the beads of her rosary. To the novices who asked how she felt, she would respond with gentle joy, as the Paron wishes. In her final days, in February 1947, human frailty manifested itself. In delirium caused by high fever, Bakhita's mind momentarily returned to the traumas of the past. The sisters keeping vigil heard her whisper with anguish, "Please, loosen the chains. They are too heavy." It was the final combat, the final purification of memory. But the agony quickly dissipated. Soon her face lit up. The expression of pain disappeared, giving way to celestial serenity. "La Madonna, La Madonna," she explained with joy. Our Lady, whom she had loved all her life, came to fetch her personally. On February 8th, Saint Bakhita closed her eyes to this world. She did not depart as a slave, but as a faithful servant. Her last words were a sigh of total surrender. "I am going, slowly, step by step, to my Lord." Bakhita's death immediately revealed her sanctity. Those who came to bid her farewell before the coffin witnessed a phenomenon that defies science. Rigor mortis did not occur. Her body remained flexible, warm, and soft, like that of a person who is merely sleeping a peaceful sleep. The mothers of Schio brought their children to hold the hand of the dark sister, moving her arms freely. It was God's final answer. The body marked by human cruelty was preserved in divine tenderness. Her fame of sanctity crossed borders and oceans, and it was in Brazil, in the city of Santos on the coast of Sao Paulo, that heaven confirmed her glory with an incontestable miracle. In 1992, a woman named Eva da Costa suffered from extremely severe ulcers on her legs, serious complications from diabetes and hypertension. The wounds were deep, infected, and had not healed for years, resisting all medical treatments. The pain was constant, and amputation seemed the only fate. In the midst of suffering, Dona Eva prayed with faith, asking for the intercession of Blessed Josephine Bakhita. What happened next was instantaneous and clinically inexplicable. The chronic and open wounds closed completely. The skin regenerated, becoming healthy. The pain disappeared. Doctors testified that there was no scientific explanation for that sudden and total cure. It was this Brazilian miracle that opened the doors so that in the year 2000, in St. Peter's Square, Pope John Paul II solemnly declared Josephine Bakhita a saint for the entire Universal Church. The girl without a name, the slave sold in the markets, the woman branded with iron, was elevated to the highest honor of the altars, becoming the patroness of the oppressed and a symbol of hope. The story of Saint Bakhita speaks directly to your heart today. How many times do we feel imprisoned by circumstances, chained by old grievances, or defined by a past that wounded us? Bakhita invites us to look at our scars, whether they are visible or invisible, with a new gaze, not with bitterness, but with hope. She tells us with her sweet and maternal voice, "If you knew the Paron as I know him, you would know that nothing, absolutely nothing, can steal your inner peace." Perhaps today you can imitate Madre Moretta. Transform your routine, your simple work, your home into a sacred place of service and love. May the indestructible smile of Saint Bakhita illuminate your rest and protect your sleep tonight. If the story of this flower of the desert touched your heart and brought serenity to your night, I have a special suggestion for you to maintain and deepen this state of peace. We spoke here about life in the convent, humility, and divine protection. If you wish to continue immersed in that atmosphere of faith and miracles, I strongly recommend that you watch our video about Saint Bernadette and the Miracle of Lourdes, where healing water and simple faith meet. Or if you seek to understand how to build inner peace as solid as a rock, listen to the story of Saint Benedict and the building of peace. Both videos perfectly complement what you felt now, creating a sequence of tranquility for your rest. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel and leave your like. It is your generous way of saying yes to this content and helping us bring it to more people. Stay with God, rest under the Virgin's mantle, and until our next story.